My name's Craig Stevens. I've been living in the Teacher's House for about 15 years now, and I've always been fascinated by the history of the Teacher's House. It was built probably in the 1630s, the original house, but the school became endowed in 1686 by a wonderful man called Thomas Coton, who left it in his will to create a school for the poor children of the local area of Kingsbury. I'd been fascinated a couple of years ago to try and understand a bit more about Thomas Coton and where he lived. By looking through some old maps with my son, I managed to discover that he actually lived only a mile and a half away in a place called Coton Bridge. And looking into the maps, we went over to try and find out where his original hall was. And we actually found his hall and the footings of his hall. And thankfully, about 12 months ago, we managed to get a plaque up to show where he originally lived. That's provoked a lot of interest locally about Thomas Coton, where he lived, and a bit more about the history of the man. And we've been able to establish quite a bit about the hall itself. And even today, actually, some materials dropped off that illustrated how old his original hall was, and it actually looked like it went back to the 1500s. I think the thing that fascinates me is history and living history, and I think when you live in an old property, you've sensed that living history. And what's been lovely about this story is that the history has evolved not just from this house, but from to the man who actually inspired it and built it. And increasingly now I'm finding more about his hall, the footings of his hall. And one of the things that's a great shame really is, only uncovered today, is that that building was standing in 1989, you know, so it's such a pity that it did get knocked down. At least now his hall's recognised, at least the connection between the hall and the house is recognised. And I'm very optimistic, particularly working with the Tame Valley project, that we can uncover a little bit more of the footings and start to really pick away at the history. And really is a wonderful story of a man who had an ambition to really drive education through the poor people and the poor children around Kingsbury, really. Yeah, so a little bit about Thomas Coton. As I said, there's a reasonable amount known about the school, but not a huge amount known about the man. But what is quite clear is, and they are hints to, you know, the fact that he was quite prominent, is you do have a Coton Lane, Coton Hall Fisheries, and that's actually where the Coton Hall is. And it's really strange that I'd never made the connection that Coton Hall Fisheries was really where his hall would actually be, but surprisingly a lot of people in the village hadn't done that. Once we'd established where Coton Hall was, it really filled my imagination with the fact that from that piece of land where his hall stood, he could look across to Kingsbury and actually see in his mind where he'd like to have the school. And certainly indications now are that, you know, perhaps he converted what was the original vicarage into the school. And it certainly looks as if it was quite a substantial stone-built building that had a brick frontage put onto it in the 1680s. But that connection between village and hall really is quite powerful. What's great about it now is many people in the village know the connection between the house and the hall and the great history of Thomas Coton, and that's fantastic. And one thing that I am very proud of is that I've been part of resurrecting some of that history and legacy of education that's been in the Kingsbury village for over 330 years.